I call the member for Gippsland.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I commend the member for his courage and wish him well on his journey. Deputy Speaker, I rise to highlight community concerns in relation to the environmental health of the Gippsland Lakes and the catchments. The Gippsland Lakes are both a tourism icon for my region and highly valued by the local community. They're the largest inland waterway in the southern hemisphere and they're quite a magnificent network of lakes and rivers. The Ramsar-listed wetlands are a feature of the Gippsland Lakes system. The environmental characteristics, however, of the Gippsland Lakes has changed dramatically since European settlement about 150 years ago. For example, Deputy Speaker, the installation of an artificial entrance has meant that a mainly freshwater system is now predominantly saltwater, and it's had an impact on the vegetation and the environment of the lakes. Activities in the catchment, of course, with the industrialisation of major towns and the agricultural impacts have also flowed through to the what is quite an extensive coastal lagoon system, but in context of the size of the catchment, quite a small area of lake systems to manage the impacts that are flowing through from the catchment. Deputy Speaker, to the extent that the lakes are under stress, it has been pointed out by leading CSIRO researcher Graham Harris as long as 8 years ago at a forum in Sale that the lakes are at a tipping point and they could go either way. The signs of stress are evident in recent algal blooms. Over the past 10 years we've had quite a few and have had a major impact on the people's capacity to enjoy the lake system, but also an economic impact in terms of the tourism industry. Deputy Speaker, I'm an optimist by nature, and I believe that the resourcefulness of the people and with good science and the goodwill of so many volunteers on the ground doing that practical environmental work, we can in fact save the Gippsland Lakes. And I'm confident that the lakes can recover, but it will take a willingness from governments at both levels to work faster and provide more resources to the community. The Gippsland Lakes Task Force has a target of reducing the nutrient load by 40% flowing into the lake system, and work has already begun in that regard. Currently, the state government is considering its next round of funding for the lakes. There's normally a 2 to 3 year time frame, and the state government, I believe, should allocate at least $10 million over the next 3 years to maintain and improve the environment of Gippsland Lakes and catchment. The environmental challenges facing the Gippsland Lakes and catchment require ongoing and concerted efforts on the ground, along with the additional funding for the research required to overcome some of the knowledge gaps we currently have. The health of the lakes and the catchment is critical to the social and economic and cultural life of our region, and I'll be continuing to fight to make sure that we receive our fair share of state and federal government funding in that regard. Now, my figure of $10 million is based on the original funding commitment in 2002 to 2006 from the former Brax government, which saw $3.2 million per year provided to the task force activities, which are primarily aimed at, as I said, at reducing the nutrient flow into the system. Unfortunately, the former Deputy Premier, John Thwaites, cut that funding in half in 2006, and last year a public meeting attended by more than 200 people in Bensdale unanimously supported my position that both the state and federal government's funding commitments must be increased for the long-term health of Gippsland Lakes and catchment. I believe that both the Task Force and the Gippsland Coastal Board have done a good job with the limited resources they have at their disposal. But if we really want to make a difference to the environmental health of Gippsland Lakes, it's going to take a lot more than the funding currently provided from state and federal governments. Keeping in mind that the environmental significance or environmental challenges which the recent bushfires have also presented in the west of the catchment area. The burnt hillsides are going to be a threat to the water quality if we experience heavy rain before there's any chance for the vegetation to re-establish itself. There's an enormous amount of work required and in the catchment area to minimise the impacts of those fires, in addition to the ongoing projects on private land to reduce the flow of nutrients. And I understand the Minister for Agriculture has indicated that the Caring for Our Country funding will be increased to assist in the bushfire-affected communities, and I take him at his word that that will happen. From the Rudd government's perspective, the contribution to the environmental health of the catchment has been 16 months of promises, and unfortunately not a cent is made on the ground at this stage. It's not a record to be proud of. The Labor Party promised $3 million over 3 years during the 2007 election campaign, and to date not a single project has been funded. It's my understanding that the federal government has just finalised contracts for the money to be provided to local catchment management authorities, but nothing has actually flowed yet to projects on the ground. Deputy Speaker, the Gippsland Lakes will need our help now and into the future, and the community expects us to do better. And finally, in the time that I have left to me, I'd like to highlight the questions that are arising now in terms of Australia meeting its obligations to the Ramsar listed wetlands. As I mentioned, the Gippsland Lakes is a Ramsar listed wetland. Australia was one of the first 5 founding nations to sign the Ramsar Convention in 1971 and now lists 65 wetlands of significance. There is a concern that Australia, and this is not a criticism of the current government, its governments over many years, has failed to live up to the treaty. It's very easy to sign these treaties, but we need to meet our obligations to these international conventions. It's something I'll be pursuing further with the government. Thank you.